Yeah, so how to start a publication newsletter on Medium. Just some context. I'm Harris. I work on the content team at Medium, and I send the Medium newsletter every day, which is the newsletter that is associated with the Medium blog. You can go to blog.medium.com/newsletter to subscribe. We send that out every day with great stories that we're finding on Medium. The goal is really just to deepen your understanding of the world every day with stories that we are finding written by all of you. And yeah, here's like just some examples of issues that we've sent recently. So we did CrowdStrike, as many of you know, that sort of grounded a lot of planes a month ago and was there was a lot of interesting writing about it on Medium from experts in IT and some CrowdStrike customers. So we featured that. And then we've also done psychology around like how being irrational helps us cooperate. We're doing in a few weeks, we're going to do a whole week about cognitive biases and psychology, which should be really fun. And again, all of this is bubbling up from what all of you are writing on the platform. So this is our publication newsletter, and in a bit, I'll share how you can use this tool to set up your own publication newsletter on Medium. These are our stats, which actually, I'm just going to show you like sort of a live demo. This is what the product looks like for us when we're setting up our newsletter. And you can also subscribe directly on this page, but this is like what it looks like as an admin, as a pub owner. And the stats, yeah, so here are stats. It goes out to a few million people every day. Our open rate is like 30 to 40%. It's like pretty stable, which is good. The industry average is around 30, so like anything above 30 is good. And we do have like the click-through rate's pretty low, but clicking isn't really our goal, at least for this newsletter. The goal is mainly like reading. We just want it to be like a good reading experience in the inbox. So that's what we're mainly focused on. But yeah, that's just sort of a window into our stats. And again, we use Medium's product to send it out to 2 million people every day. And I want to back up for a second and just talk about what is a Medium publication newsletter in the first place and why you might be interested in starting one. Basically, a Medium publication newsletter is a newsletter that is associated with your community on Medium, your publication that you've created, whatever that may be. And there are a lot of publications that have set these up on Medium. Here's the Belladonna, their newsletter, which is associated with their publication, the Belladonna Comedy. And this is a really common use case that I see from publications on Medium, where they send out once a week, once a month, maybe a roundup of some of their top stories, and also a content call for writers who might be interested in writing for them. There's also Prism and Pen has their newsletter. Towards Data Science has a newsletter. Lots of publications use a newsletter to do sharing top stories, sharing announcements, sharing writing prompts, and sort of activating their community. So it's a way basically that you can get closer to your community on Medium, your publication community. And to access any publication's newsletter, you just go to the publication homepage and do /newsletter. So like the Belladonna Comedy, this is their homepage. And then to get to their newsletter, you just add /newsletter to the publication, and then you're on their newsletter page. Yeah, and so how do you start a newsletter for your pub? I'm going to do a live demo for this. So I created a publication of my own about porcupines, which is a new community that I'm starting. And anyone can start a publication on Medium if you're a member. You log into Medium, click your avatar, and then click Manage Publications, and you can start a new publication in seconds. Once you have your publication up, then you click the avatar for the publication and the newsletter feature, and then you can easily create a newsletter. So I'm going to call this my Porcupine Weekly Digest. And, And you can add an avatar if you want. You can call it whatever you want. Like you can just call it the name of the publication and say it's their newsletter, but you can customize it. And then create this newsletter. So now I've started a newsletter for my publication, and anyone can go to this URL and subscribe to the newsletter. And if I want to write one and send it out to my subscribers, just write a newsletter. And it really looks exactly like the Medium editor. So and then you can write whatever you want here. You can add imagery, just like a Medium post. You can email yourself a preview and then either send it or schedule it for later. And that's what we do with the Medium newsletter. We usually just schedule them the day before. Yeah, so that's a quick rundown of just very briefly how to start a Medium publication newsletter. I have a few more things to share and then we'll get to questions. I already see some good questions coming in, but yeah, I wanted to share like a few tips just from me, from what I've learned from sending the Medium newsletter every day to 2 million people. We've been doing it since January 31st, so about 7 months now. And we've learned a lot and we're still working on making it better. We're still improving it every day and trying to like really focus it and hone it. But here are some lessons that are useful for you if you're starting a newsletter. I think the first thing to keep in mind is that a newsletter is a relationship between you and your readers. So think about how you can make that, how you can sort of take advantage of the fact that like you're actually directly in their inbox, and how can you prompt them or ask them to reply or make that relationship richer through this tool of starting a publication newsletter. Something that we've tried is a quiz, and this is still a work in progress. We've started doing these like short quizzes at the end of the Medium newsletter where we'll like zoom in on an image that's related to a story from the newsletter, and then people guess. And it's actually been really fun, but also like a really good way to get people involved and reading the newsletter. So that's just one way that we're starting to work on engagement and developing a relationship with our readers. So really just try things, try different formats. The good thing about a newsletter is you're always sending it again. In our case, it's the next day, but it's an ongoing relationship. So you can try something, and if it doesn't work, you can just try something new the next time. And if you're trying to write something editorial, sort of like the Medium newsletter, but really I think no matter what you're sending, like it has to be worth reading for some reason. So think about the job that you're doing for the people who are going to receive this in their inbox. And there are a lot of different jobs that a newsletter can do. It can save people time. It can help people make big decisions. It can delight people. It can do a combination of these things. It can inform people. We're still working on figuring this out, and it's a process for the Medium newsletter, and for any newsletter that you send, it will be a process. But I think it's just good to think to yourself of what job am I actually helping people accomplish. And we always do at least 2 rounds of edits for a newsletter. I was talking with Tony actually at the beginning of this project about this, and he used to send a Better Humans newsletter before he was CEO, which you can still see on his Medium profile, and is actually really useful for me just to like look through and see like his approach to sending a newsletter every day. But every round of edits that you pour into any editorial product, but a newsletter especially, just makes it stronger and makes it more focused. So we do at least 2 rounds no matter what, and usually a lot more. And this is important, I think, just for writing in general, but also for a newsletter. Like it should be for someone specific. If you try to write for everyone, you will write for no one. Like think of a specific person that you know, someone in your industry, someone in your community who would appreciate getting this newsletter, and write for them instead of writing for everyone. Like a lot of times what I envision when I'm writing a newsletter is that I'm just like writing to my best friend or writing to someone who I know really well. And that sense of like intimacy will sort of come through and bleed into the rest of the newsletter. And then I just wanted to end with a quick plug for the Inbox Collective, which is a newsletter about writing newsletters by Dan Oshinsky, who's an expert in this topic. And I read it a lot. I've gotten a lot of wisdom from it. So wanted to recommend that. And yeah, subscribe to the Medium newsletter if you haven't. I'm going to stop sharing and we can talk about questions. Yeah, if anyone has questions, feel free to drop it in the Q&A. I'm seeing a few. So can a person simply link their author blog to a Medium publication is a question that just came in. This is a good question, I think, because it sort of points out something that's maybe not always clear about joining Medium, which is that author profiles and publications are two separate features. And if you want to start a publication newsletter, you have to start a publication. It's not something that we have like on the profile page, at least this specific feature that I was discussing. So yeah. Can we curate content from other authors on Medium? Yeah, absolutely. This is something you can, I think that's actually a great idea for a newsletter. Like, what are some of the best stories that you've read on Medium or elsewhere? And then putting them into a newsletter. I would love to read that. And yeah, here's actually a really good question from Mike Palmer, which is schedule to send, how do people get it? Is there an email list? So yeah, let me share my screen for this one because this is a good question. So if you start a Medium newsletter, people will have to come directly to this landing page to subscribe to it. So a best practice that we've found is to pin it to the navigation on your publication. And I can actually show you how to do that with my Porcupine one really quick. Yeah, so if you go to this publication settings page, this is like pretty in the weeds, but maybe helpful if you are setting it up and want to know like sort of how to raise visibility for your publication newsletter. Go to the publication settings page and then actually I think it's in, yeah, it's in navigation. So in the navigation tab, you'll want to add a newsletter tab and yeah, it has to be this one where you're linking to a different site. And then you'll just drop in, where was my, this is a lot of like demoing. Okay, so yeah, you'll drop in the link to that, and then you do need to, okay, you need to have at least one tab available, like one tab to something else. So once you add like another tab to a topic or, yeah, let's just do trending stories. Okay, so now then on your nav for your pub, you have a link to the newsletter, which helps with people who want to subscribe. Yeah, you should, Claire, that's like every publication that I've seen that has this newsletter feature, like the ones where they have a big audience, they've added it to the homepage. That's like one way to get people to know about it. Okay, let me go back to questions. Wow, okay, lots of questions. If you set up a newsletter in Medium, does or can it go to paid Medium subscribers, or can you use it more broadly? That's a good question. It can go to anyone. So anyone can subscribe to your newsletter. They don't have to be a paid subscriber. Yeah, okay. This question from Martinez. A few months ago, there was a survey sent to publication editors regarding potential new features for the newsletter. I was wondering if there are any plans to implement these features. For example, the ability to access publication followers through a newsletter would be fantastic. Again, like as Tony mentioned during his keynote, we've learned sort of not to promise features before they're ready, but I agree with you. This is something that we're, as you saw, we did send out a survey about this earlier this year, and we're researching this and we're looking into this. And I think there's definitely a lot of room to make this feature easier to use. All right, I'm looking through everything else in the Q&A. How often should I send a newsletter for my personal publication? I think it's really up to you. The thing that this is actually a piece of advice from Dan Oshinsky that I really like is you can think of a newsletter in like seasons. So if you want to commit to, I think you should probably commit to something for a certain period of time. So if you want to commit to say like a week, like once a week for 3 months, and commit to that, see how that feels, and know that it's only for 3 months. And then at the end of that period, you can like regroup and try to see if you want to change the cadence, or if you want to just start monthly and just do it like, I'm going to only send this monthly because that's realistic for me for like 6 months. And then after 6 months, you can regroup and start like a new season of your newsletter. That's sort of a way to approach it. But there's no there's no like best frequency. It's really just what works for you. Newsletters do not generate earnings for the Medium Partner Program. That's correct. They do not. They're really just a way to directly connect with your publication audience outside of the stories that you're publishing. Yep. And okay, I'm going to look at the chat. The create newsletter link, Tom, is in, if you go to, let me just share it one more. I'll show it one more time. So if you're on your publication homepage, click the square icon, which will be your publication avatar, and then just click newsletter. Where can you find subscribers? On the stats page. So the newsletter, you go to your newsletter landing page, stats, and then you'll see subscribers up here. All right, I'm looking at more questions. Yep, Inbox Collective was the resource that I shared. It's a newsletter basically about newsletters, and I recommend it. Okay, there are a few more coming in the Q&A. Yeah, this is a good question from Barb. Does a newsletter come up as a post on the publication for everyone to read? And does it go to followers of the pub? Or they have to also subscribe to the newsletter? This is a really good question. It is a post on Medium too. So every newsletter that you send through the publication tool, the pub newsletter tool, is also a post. Anyone can find it on Medium, clap for it on Medium. It does go to followers of your publication. It does not automatically show up on your publication homepage. So if you want to put it there, you'll need to manually put it on your publication homepage, like the post of a newsletter that you've sent. But they all show up in feeds, they show up in recommendations, they go out as like normal posts, and they're floating around Medium in the digest and in the feed just like a normal post, which is, I think, part of the beauty of them too, is they can be discovered long after you've sent the newsletter. Like they can be discovered basically just as stories on Medium. How important is the subject? I'm just going to take a few more. How important is the subject? I assume the same important as article title. This is a question from Jeff. Subject line is really, really important, I think, when sending a newsletter. Let me just share some of ours. What we try to do in the Medium newsletter, at least, is have a subject line that contains obviously a preview of what's in the newsletter, but ideally contains some kind of like wisdom or lesson. We don't always do a great job of that, but here's a good one. Like, I think this is a ideal subject line for the Medium newsletter because it actually has like some wisdom or a lesson in it. And even if you don't open the newsletter, you're getting something from it. It doesn't feel like clickbait, and it doesn't just feel like a tease, basically. But when you're writing a newsletter, yeah, the title will be the subject line in the inbox. And if you email yourself a preview, you'll see then that's the subject line. Okay, I'm going through a few more questions. When is the best time for a publication to start a newsletter? I would say at the beginning, like when you're starting the pub, but it's really up to you. You can wait until you've like built up an audience for your publication and then start a newsletter and then start like advertising that newsletter in your stories. Do people see, okay, this is a good question from Laura. From Laura, do people see the entire newsletter in the email, or do they have to go to Medium? They see the entire newsletter in the email. So everything you type here will come directly into their email, the whole thing. Do subscribers have to be Medium members? No, they do not. Not for publication newsletters right now. Can Medium readers see all past newsletters somewhere? Yes. So if you go to the newsletter homepage, you can see every newsletter the publication has sent. And you can click into them, and they're just posts like normal posts. And these were sent as a newsletter. You can see here that it was sent as a newsletter. This is the tell. And that's how you'll know that it was sent as a publication newsletter by Kristen for her publication, The Belladonna. Yeah. People are asking. Thanks, Robin. Yeah, I do work on this like every day. I'm very familiar with this tool. People are asking about Inbox Collective. Here's Inbox Collective. It is a newsletter for people who make newsletters. It's actually really, really useful. And the link to the Medium newsletter is this. Okay, we have 3 minutes, so maybe I can just take 1 or 2 more questions. Do I need other writers to contribute, or can it just be me? So when you don't need other writers to contribute. You can do whatever you want. It's a newsletter that is basically anyone who's an editor of the publication can send a newsletter. So they have to be an editor to actually send one. But if you're starting a publication with a few other editors, any of you can send a publication newsletter. And you can feature writers in the publication. And then one more question, which I think is a really good one. If a newsletter is intended to resemble a common story, what layout or format do you recommend for writing it? Do you suggest structuring it like a typical newsletter with summaries and recommended links, or should it be written as a straightforward narrative? This is, again, completely up to you. We've experimented with a bunch of different structures in the Medium newsletter. If you go through the post, you'll see we usually start with like a note, and then we'll have like some shorter links and then some like tips at the bottom. But we've tried a bunch of different things. The Belladonna, not to keep coming back to them, but like they've also tried a bunch of different things. They do a lot of like most read stories, content calls. Like this is a lot of links. Like it's totally up to you. You can use any of these formats, and I suggest experimenting with them too. Okay, we have 2 minutes. All right, I think we're gonna wrap it up. I do recommend, if you have questions about how to use this, we do have a help center page. I'll drop that in the chat 1 second. Yes, okay. So really everything I said about how to use it is in this help center page. But thank you. This was great. And the recording will be up later today. Enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you all for coming to this session about publication newsletters. See ya.